the big picture on why we're even talking about jobs, you know, we're 9% unemployment, and that's a huge problem, but it does not describe the problem clearly enough. So I bring this chart along here that is a little bit better to kind of explain what we have. Basically, we're spending 3.5 trillion a year. We're bringing in 2.2 trillion a year. Now, if you have ever spent more in your personal budget than what you're bringing in, the alarm flags ought to be going up, because you know this is not sustainable. I've done the math for us people on the east side and put it up here, but you can do the math in your head. We're basically $1.3 trillion short. In answer to your question, some people are saying, oh, you're doing dangerous, deep, frightening cuts to the budget. And other people are saying you're not doing cuts at all. You can make your own decision. We cut in our first HR1 $60 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, but to put it in context, this moves 3.5 to 3.44. Now, if you went to your bank and you said, I'm spending $3,500 a month and I'm bringing in $2,200 a month, but I've cut my expenses from $3,500 a month to $3,440 a month, your banker might not be too impressed. I don't think the American people are too impressed with the cuts that we're doing so far. But as a business owner, I would tell you, you cannot cut deeply enough to get 3.5 to 2.2. You must move the 2.2 toward 3.5. That's what we need to be doing. The way you increase 2.2, how do we do that? How does the government get more revenue? By more jobs. If you go up on taxes, what you do is kill jobs. Tax increases kill jobs. Tax decreases create jobs. So we're in this weird anomaly that we're so short of money. The first knee-jerk in politicians is to increase taxes, but that's going to kill more jobs. So the only move left to us is to increase jobs. And so I began, as a business owner, I began to say, okay, we can't just go and talk about creating jobs. We can't talk about creating the environment to create jobs. Let's look at why jobs are not existing out here. When I walk through the forest, I see that we used to have jobs here in Cloudcroft, a really good industry. People had careers that they were building, and instead of those careers, now we have just the tourism. I don't diminish tourism, but they're never going to pay the kind of pay that timber jobs did. So I'm saying, why did we shut those jobs down? We didn't get competed out of business. It's not that Canada was a better competitor on timber products. It's that our government passed a regulation that killed our jobs. If our government killed the jobs, then we can find a better way to accomplish the same thing the government wanted to, and create jobs and accomplish that. If you were here in the 70s, you would remember the spotted owl. The spotted owl is the regulation that we said we're going to keep the habitat. We don't want the spotted owl to go extinct. I don't want the spotted owl to go extinct either. I just don't think we should have killed every job in the timber industry statewide and nationwide, and that's basically what we did. 20,000 jobs in New Mexico in timber alone, and now we're down to 0. Why did we do that? It was an extreme response, in my opinion. We can keep the spotted owl alive in sanctuaries. You can put 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres, I don't know. We will let the scientists discuss that. But create sanctuaries. This forest here is 1 million acres. You don't need 1 million acres as habitat. So let's put people back to work, keep the spotted owl alive, and if you're reading your copy of the bill, there are people going to be saying, well, those mean Republicans want to clear cut the forest. Don't want to do that at all. I have a friend in Virginia. His father ran a small land and lumber company, land and lumber, 5,000 acres. And his father worked his whole career on that 5,000 acres cutting timber. They have about 50 employees. They got a little sawmill. 50 employees, think what that would be here. And they only have 5,000 acres. Now then, his son, that was my navigator when I was in Vietnam, his son now has managed that business his whole life on 5,000 acres. They don't ever clear cut it. They just go through and harvest it. And the next year they go and they harvest and harvest. If we would put 5,000 acre allotments out in this forest and lease those out for 10, 20, 30 years, people would take care of the forest. The Forest Service could watch and make sure they do it correctly. But jobs would start tomorrow. I've been visiting with John over here, somewhere in here, right here. And John says if we simply allowed it, that people would be out there cutting trees tomorrow. And they would do it. He showed me pictures of what he's doing. Well-spaced, widely spaced trees. 50, 75, 100 trees per acre. You might say, well, that's too few. No, that's exactly what we had through all of our history. our arid climate won't support the 2,500 trees per acre we've got now. What happens when you have such an overcrowding? In our forest, the same thing that happens when you got overcrowding in a population center. You put too many people in a small area, you don't have enough food, enough water, enough nutrition, enough sunlight. And those trees grow tall and spindly and weak. Disease sets in exactly like it has here, so you lose millions of trees to disease. They lost 1 million trees outside Santa Fe to disease. They're so crowded up, couldn't get enough water, not enough nutrients. They're weakened for pests, they're weakened for fires, and so we didn't see growing up those monstrous forest fires that we're seeing now. That's because we're mismanaging the forest. This dry, arid climate should not be this many trees per acre. So let's go ahead and harvest them, create the jobs, make our forest more healthy, and the healthy forest is going to look like it does when you drive to Ruidoso. On one side, you have the National Forest Service, which doesn't cut trees. On the other side, you've got the mescaleros, who can cut trees. Their forest looks like a healthy forest should. And by the way, when the fire was sweeping through the National Forest, it got to the mescaleros, it dropped down and became a grass fire there. Our tree rings show us that happened. If you look at tree rings, it'll show you every 8 years a hot fire burned through the grass, but it did not kill the big trees. Let's start cutting trees, we create jobs, we move the 2.2 towards the 3.5. Now think about this. Every person that you bring off unemployment is somebody that is living up here. They're costing you as taxpayer. Those people quit costing, they are no longer receiving unemployment when they get a job. They're not on food stamps, they're not on welfare, and so this number gets smaller while this number gets bigger. And that's what I'm telling our leadership. You're standing in Washington talking only about cutting spending, and you can't cut enough to get us to prosperity. We have to reinvest in our jobs and move the 2.2 and the 3.5 towards themselves simultaneously. That's where the real possibility of curing our economy. Now, the rest of this chart is when you run this deficit, which we're doing now, when you have it out of balance, this deficit, as we spend the money, actually becomes debt. So I have it running into this debt barrel, and the debt barrel's got 15 trillion of debt in it. You would see that it would take us 7 years to pay off our debt, and we'd still have a little bit left. That's if we didn't have to run the government, if you could take everything. Now, if you went to your banker and told him, I'm going to use all my revenue for the next 7 years and I can pay my debt off, your banker would say, get out of here. Our banker is China, and our banker, China, has said 2 times in the last year or year and a half that we're not going to fund you any more money, we're not going to loan you money. When your banker tells you we're not going to loan you money, the alarm bells ought to really be going off. But now then, I want this piece to get there because this should be offensive to you, but it's not that we owe 15 trillion. The debt has been running outside the barrel. It's filled up and running over, so you see the sludge running down on the ground around our barrel hill. That's the debt that Washington is embarrassed to tell you that we owe that money to. So Washington simply quits talking about it like we don't owe it. This is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. How many of you think we're not going to pay those? How many think we don't fund those? We do fund them, but we just don't talk about how much we owe. That's 202 trillion. It would take us 100 years with this kind of income to pay what we really owe. This should be alarming you at this point. One more thing, I'm not seeing people jump up and run out the door, which is my response when I hear this stuff. I don't want to run for cover. But this little chart here then tells us exactly the same thing. When I talk about our country, you always talk about the future, and you're worried about the kind of future you're going to pass along to your children. So I ask our audiences, first of all, how many of you have made more money in your lifetime than your parents did? I'll just ask y'all. Raise your hand. How many people raise more? That's almost everybody in the audience. The next question I ask is how many people think your kids are going to earn more in their lifetime and have a better standard of living than you have? Some. And that's about it. We get about 4 or 5, 7, and in the audience. Well, this chart shows us that you're perceiving it correctly. This shows the income per person, and this is the years on the bottom. So in 1968, we made this much. 1988, we made this much. And you can see this curve is now flattening out and starting down. That tells you that you're correct. If you believe your children are not going to earn more, yours might, but nationwide, we're not going to do it. We're going to give our kids a worse financial future than we inherited from our family. But then the alarming thing is out here. The nature of graphs is that they go on and on. That's the nature of a graph. History doesn't end here. You could go to infinity out there, but the graph quits. Now, what does that mean when the graph quits? And by the way, this is on the Office of Management Budget, the LMD's website. It's on the CBO, Congressional Budget Office. White House and Congressional, they both agree, it's nonpartisan, it's Democrats in the White House, it's a mixture over in the House and the Senate. Both are saying this, you can find this exact chart, you see it's been downloaded, I downloaded it from those websites. Both are saying that. What does that mean when this chart just quits going? What, yeah.
The economy's collapsed.
The economy collapses right there. You say, well, that can't happen. Any of you remember the Soviet Union? What happened to them is Ronald Reagan said, if we make them accelerate their spending on defense, they're going to run and they're going to look like this. They're going to spend this much and they're going to be bringing in that much. He said, I believe if we do that for 4 or 5 years, we can collapse their economy. Their economy collapsed. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Now it's Russia and all the small little stands that used to be a part of them and all the other countries. And yet we're looking at it on a chart and our people in Washington are kind of playing games. It's time to quit playing games and put people back to work. The only thing that's going to solve this problem, make our economy whole for the future, is put people back to work. So this is just the first of a series of bills that we're going to put in. This is the first thing, put Americans back to work. It's a false choice when you say protect the environment or jobs. That's a false choice. We can protect the environment and put people to work. The next area I want to go to is offshore. You saw what happened with BP. BP should be 100% accountable for what happened. That was my business. I was in that. My wife and I had a business that fixed oil wells. We didn't fix the big stuff offshore. We did the small stuff onshore. But it's the same theory, same principle, and I will tell you BP made mistakes. I don't want to argue whether BP should be accountable. I want to argue that we shouldn't have killed the 100,000 jobs and made this number get smaller and put people on unemployment and welfare. We should not have done that. The second thing, there's another thing happening. When you can't raise taxes and when we don't have the budget matched here and you can't borrow money and the Chinese are saying we're not going to loan you as much, how does a nation fix its problem then? What do? Print money. So our nation has been printing money. 2.6 trillion last year. More money than we took in from taxes we printed. That's causing inflation. When you print money, that causes inflation. So if only the price of oil were going up, you could say, well, it's the trouble in the Middle East. Or it's those greedy oil companies. You could say whatever. But it's not just the price of oil. The price of vegetables is skyrocketing. Lady this morning said $2.79 for a head of lettuce. Skyrocketing prices right now. Oil, gasoline, vegetables, gold, silver, everything is going up. It's not because the vegetables are worth twice and 3 times what you paid yesterday for them. It's that the dollars you're spending are worth less. We're inflating your dollars. So understand that this eats away at every single layer of society. It eats away at your prosperity. If you're retired, it eats away at the value of your retirement so that you had enough to make it and now you don't. It is absolutely imperative that we pass bills like this one that we're introducing today. Again, simple proposition, keep the species alive, don't clear cut, but put our workers back to work. That's nice and clean, 2 pages. Normally it takes 1,000 pages in Washington to do that. I just told our staff, let's keep it simple where people can understand it. So this is the discussion we're here to talk about today. We believe it's possible. We believe that the best days of the country are ahead of us, because I think Americans are going to insist that we put us back to work. I think they're going to insist that we drill for American energy, that we begin to build windmills to create solar or wind power, create solar farms. I think they're going to insist that we cure the economy, that we put people back to work by creating American jobs to produce American stuff. So we're taking the lead. We campaign saying that we're going to do everything we can to create jobs because I believe that's where the solution for this generation is and for future generations. And you can see here, if we don't cure it, then the outcome is going to be horrible for our descendants, for our kids and grandkids. We've got a horrible outcome within many of your lifetimes. I probably won't see 2037. If I do, I'm probably not going to care much about it. But I will tell you there are people in this room that are going to care about it, and I care about my kids and grandkids' future. So join with me today. Let's send a message to Washington. Put New Mexicans and put Americans back to work. That's the simple concept.